Hi everyone, welcome to the May Tech Talk of InfosSecGirls and owaspwia in AppSec. Thank you so much for all the support that you have shown for the community. The three main goals that we have for women in AppSec and InfosSecGirls, which people have been asking, and we actually want to share with all of you to create a community where women can speak freely about their interest in cybersecurity, and it's all inclusive. It's not that we want to have a separate community. Apart from that, we want to provide a platform for women to offer and to receive professional mentorship. The third goal that we have, that we want to train women who are new to the industry in cybersecurity. To revive the same goals, we have given the sessions and trainings at multiple conferences this year and in the past few years, and looking forward to many more. We encourage all of you to be part of it and be a speaker. Today, we have three wonderful ladies with us on the show with expertise in diverse areas in information security. First, we have Zainab. So about Zainab, she's founded HasGeek with Kiran, and she's also the CEO of HasGeek. She has also curated some of the India's best technology conferences like RootConf, Meta Refresh, The Fifth Elephant, JSFU. I'm wearing the T-shirt today. She gave me last time we met. Meta Refresh, 50P, and many more. So about RootConf, I'm really a big fan because she mentioned that they will have a daycare. Oh, I am I would say I can't stop admiring RootConf because for almost mother is a heaven. Yeah. So over to you, Zainab.
Okay. Thanks, Vandana. Thank you for the opportunity. And I'm extremely sorry that I don't have a presentation, but I promise that I will send all the notes from the session. This is the first time I'm doing this session. So I didn't, I mean, I basically just wrote it all down and said, let me just try to talk extempore. But I did want to make this interactive, and the goal of the session is to basically help you to break down into steps how you go about actually submitting an abstract for a conference. I think the hardest problem with respect to speaking at conferences is this constant inertia and putting off and saying, okay, I will, uh, I will submit the form for speaking tomorrow. I'll submit it day after. And by the time we know, it's like the night before the deadline, and then the deadline has passed. Now, how do we make it possible? And from our experience, we've particularly noted that women tend to face this inertia far more because there's this constant feeling of imposter syndrome saying that I don't know enough about the subject matter. And therefore, does it really make sense for me to kind of talk about this? I don't have depth, I don't have detail. And we found this that across board, women tend to question their ability to kind of know a subject far more than a man would do. So what I wanted to kind of do in this session was to just break it down for all of you in terms of like how do you think about submitting a topic for a conference? How do you kind of frame it, and how do you improve your chances of getting selected? Because being able to talk involves doing a bunch of things, and then I just wanted to break down into a bunch of practical suggestions over here. So I will, like I said, I promise to sort of share all these notes with all of you in the next 2 days. But let's see how we can make it interactive, considering that Vandana is looking at the responses. So one question I wanted to ask everybody who's kind of listening in today and who's on the session is how many of you have actually submitted a talk to speak at a conference? Raise your hands. Maybe Vandana can tell us, how many of you have actually done this?
I've done it.
Okay. Okay. How many of you got accepted, or how many of you got accepted to speak at a conference? I have been rejected to speak at many conferences despite organizing the conferences myself. Okay. So whether you got accepted accepted or rejected, I think the question is, did you be ever think about the reasons why we got accepted or rejected to speak at a conference? And this is really what I want to kind of break down for all of us to see, like, let's try to walk backwards and say, what is it that actually makes for a good talk at a conference? It doesn't matter whether it's a technology conference, whether it's an academic conference, whether it's a law conference, but generally, what makes for a good talk? Now, if we were to kind of think about it, a good talk is really has about three elements in it. One, the talk has a very strong storyline that you can relate to. Of course, there's the question of the speaker being articulate, but the way the talk is sort of shaped is like a sort of a story that you that you constantly are engaged with, and you kind of keep saying, "Aha, I relate to this," or "Aha, I have also gone through something like this." So that's one aspect, that's one element of a good talk. The other is that the talk has very clear takeaways. Now, what do we mean by takeaways? Let's take a bunch of examples. A talk helps you to understand how to do information security. Now, one of the ways to kind of look at it would be to say that if it just tells you how to do information security, maybe it's not that interesting. But suppose if I were to tell you that this is one way of doing information security. I tried doing information security this way, and this is what I learned. Now, these learnings become the kind of takeaway for the audience, because what you've done over here is you've compared what the standard approach is, how you deviated from the standard approach, or how you built your own approach, and therefore, what did you learn from it? That's one of so that makes for a good takeaway by sharing your own learnings. Or, for example, somebody comes and says that, hey, I have tried to do security, that the standard way of doing security is XYZ, but I have discovered that there is an anti-pattern to this approach itself, and I will explain to you how. And this is what I have learned. So a good talk is really one that has very strong takeaways, either in terms of you comparing approaches or you sharing your learnings and the learnings are basically about how you went through a certain journey, and therefore how did you and what did you learn in the process, and you share those learnings with the audience. So these are the two elements that make for a very good talk: a good storyline and the clarity of the takeaways for the audience. Now, if we say that this is what a good talk consists of, then let's sort of break it down and go back to saying, how do you then submit an abstract, or how do you submit a proposal for a conference? Now, the hardest part of submitting a proposal for a conference is one tends to get stuck with the first question: what is it that I should talk about? And that question bothers everybody across the board. Now, in order to be able to think about what you can talk about, the best way to kind of do this exercise is to talk to a friend or to talk to a colleague. If that is help is not available, can you talk to the conference organizers? Because the conference organizers sometimes allow for discussions before a conference with people who are interested in submitting. The third way of doing this is never to use your computer. Sit with a paper and pen, or use a whiteboard and whiteboard markers, and start drawing out ideas and saying, okay, I could talk about this, I could talk about this, I could talk about this. Anytime that you open your computer to do something as hard as saying, I'm going to submit a proposal to speak at a conference, you will always be stuck, because the computer will have multiple distractions, and there is something in the nature of the screen of the computer that doesn't allow you to do free thinking. And so the best way to do free thinking is either to talk to somebody, or to use pen and paper, or to use a whiteboard with markers. Now, apart from being stuck at the idea, the second question that many people tend to get stuck at when they're thinking about talking at a conference is, who will be the audience for my talk? Because based on the audience, you have to you have to kind of decide on the topic, on the extent of detail you will go into, whether it will be beginner, whether it will be something fairly advanced, etc. Now, here again, there are some conferences that that one is aware of, that this is what the standard audience is. In some cases, conference organizers also give you feedback if you ask them, saying that who's going to be the audience for your talk. So if you have an understanding of who the audience is, then you can also start preparing backwards to say, okay, if this is the audience sitting in my talk, which is, if this is an audience of InfosSec practitioners, then this is how I want to be able to structure my talk, and therefore this is what I want them to take away. So knowing who your audience for the talk is extremely helpful when preparing to kind of make a submission to a conference. And finally, the question that you have to answer in writing your submission is, what is the audience going to take back from my talk? what lessons are they going to take back, or what insights are they going to take back, or what are the practical tips and advice I can give to them. So if you break it down this way, which is the ideas that you want to talk about and put the ideas in a storyline, who will be the audience, and more importantly, what will people learn from my talk, then that in itself makes for a fairly good submission to a conference. How detailed you want to go into is really a matter of how you like writing, and there are people who don't like writing, in which case you can just break it down into a structure again, use pen and paper, and try to give as many bullet points as possible. The more details you give in an abstract, the easier it becomes for conference organizers to make decisions based on the abstracts, because most conferences make decisions based on the submission that you submit. So if your first, if the submission itself is not convincing, then you stand to lose the chance of being able to make it to the shortlist. Um, so coming back to, so the final part of what I wanted to essentially talk about um, is how do you actually kind of, like, how do you set up the environment to motivate yourself to kind of write a submission for the conference. In this sense, one thing that helps is, again, don't use your computer, always use paper and pen, use whiteboard, talk to friends if possible. When you are starting to write, try to make sure that it's a Friday evening so that you have a Saturday and Sunday to think over and be able to submit your proposal on a Monday, because you do need to take some time to literally sleep over your ideas. Thirdly, when you start putting things together from the paper, pen, or the whiteboard to a computer, try to do this in a very relaxed environment, which is disturbance free. I usually find it very helpful to sit at 10 o'clock in the night and start writing these things when there is less chance of me being disturbed by anybody or getting a phone call or getting a message, etc. So you have to choose your relaxed and disturbance free time. Have plenty of water and fluids around you as you are writing and submitting, because there tends to be this stress, and one doesn't realize it, because if you're very involved in the process, you don't realize it. So drinking a lot of water, drinking a lot of fluids really helps. Um, and finally, if you have the time, you should show your talk, you should show your submission to some colleague or to a friend who can give you feedback before you actually send it to the conference. Many a times it's extremely rushed, and this is not very practical for many of us. But if you do and can, it's a good thing to kind of show your draft to a colleague or friend and get their feedback. And finally, if possible, prepare in advance and also ask questions to organizers about who's going to be the audience, what their expectations are, etc., so that you can pitch your talk. One final piece of advice based on what we've seen is a lot of people graduate from speaking at meetups and then go on to speak at conferences. But one has to understand that the audience and the setting of a meetup is pretty beginner level compared to a conference. And therefore, you can't take your meetup talk idea to submit for a conference. You're most likely going to get rejected unless and until you had a very solid talk at the meetup, and the meetup itself was highly rated and had a very focused audience, etc. So when you are submitting to a conference, raise the aspiration level and raise the level of depth that you can go into, because a detailed and a depth talk is always nicer than something that is very sort of surface level. So this is all I have to say, but I'm happy to take any questions, and I will share the notes as well in today's time.
Sure. Let me post on the YouTube live. There are a lot of people are saying that it's a really good session. So while we are getting the question, I also want to add
Hmm.
something to it. That Zainab has actually coached and facilitated mentorship for over 800 speakers from the technology industry, and she's
Yeah.
actually mentoring security people as well. We've been in the calls and
Yeah.
amazing. So Zainab, what way people can reach out to you if they have any questions or if they have any idea in mind?
They should just write to editorial@hasgeek.com, because apart from me, there is my colleague Anvesha and a bunch of other people who will be very happy to answer any questions you have.
Do you prepare your slides in advance? That's the question from Gabriel.
Okay.
Zainab, do you prepare your slides in advance for the conference? Or you just prepare an abstract first, like pen down your ideas? submit the talk, and then start working on the deck?
Right. So that's a good question. In most conferences, they only require you to submit the abstract as a way to decide on whether you will be selected or not selected for the conference. In the conferences that we organize at HasGeek, we actually make it mandatory for people to give us a draft slide deck along with their abstract, because in our experience, in spite of me saying all these nice things, we have people submitting abstracts which are simply 2 lines or like some 5 bullet points, and we don't have any much sense of what people have to say. Now, the reason why there is an insistence on submitting the slide deck, and also to answer this question in terms of how do you go on to prepare for the slide deck, is you have to remember that many things that you say in your abstract, it will not translate to your slide deck, because ideas always evolve. Your storyline gets better and better. So what you submitted in your abstract, you might probably just keep about 10% of that when you're making your slides. And what you finally go on to speak might probably an absolute deviation from what you've submitted in your abstract. It's a bit like saying, how do you write an article? You start with saying, okay, I don't have an idea, I'm just going to start writing. You write your first draft, you compare your first draft to the second draft. There's a lot of difference between the first and the second draft, because what you had originally thought of is probably not the best idea. You have revised it, you have nuanced it, and what you finally submit for publication will be extremely different from what you had originally conceptualized. So it's always good to kind of keep the abstract, but don't necessarily hold on to it with your dear life, because you are going to kind of change things. And it's always good to do a bunch of iterations. So having recognized that this process of submitting an abstract to actually speaking at a conference involves so many steps in between, we at our conferences insist that people have to prepare in advance, because that gives you this obsession to keep thinking about your idea, and helps you to kind of tell your story in a far better manner.
Okay. That's really helpful. Actually, to just on the same lines, there's another question: how to write a good abstract for submission?
Right. So, like I mentioned, the you have to think of two things when you are writing a good abstract for submission. One, you have to think about the form. The form, by form, I mean basically, how do I use form? Um, there is form and then there is substance. Form is what is the way in which you are framing this. Ideally, frame it like a story. Tell a story. And this is actually very hard for many engineers, because many of us as engineers are coached to kind of just give facts. But in order to engage an audience, tell a story. So, for example, like literally, like, have a little experience story in your abstract itself. The other thing in terms of substance is that essentially talk about who's the audience for your talk, or who you expect to be the audience for your talk. Be very clear about it. Second, what is it that people will learn, or what is it that the participants at that conference are going to learn from your talk? The more clearer you are, the better it is. But like I also mentioned, there is a paradox here, which is many a times you do yourself don't know what is the actual takeaway for the audience, and that keeps changing. If you have clarity, it's good. If you don't have clarity, indicate towards it. And finally, yeah, if you can also break down and say, how you're going to kind of structure your talk in terms of, what is going to be the beginning, the middle, the end. If you have that kind of clarity, if you can share that in your abstract, then that's actually pretty good, because it gives the organizers the confidence to say that you've really thought through your idea.
Okay. Oh, that's really great. Some other questions on submitting a talk while we have a security audience. Can we present a topic which is mostly a tutorial rather than a discussion on a research?
Yeah.
Because um, it should be a new research all the time, or there are topics which pre-exist.
Mm.
Can you give a talk on
Mm.
that as well?
Mm. So there are conferences that accept talks which are based on explaining new research, or explaining existing research and how that is fitted into your work. Now that again
Mhm.
depends on the nature of the conference and who the intended audience is. So I'll give an example. I'm a trained sociologist. I studied political science. Now in a political science conference, the way things work is that it's perfectly okay to kind of talk about some research that was done in the past or some new research that has come up, but talk about it in relation to your own work or in relation to your research. How do those concepts apply over here? So ideally, that is what makes for a really good talk, where you can actually show how the concepts apply in practice. Because this is also one of the big challenges in our education system, which is that we are not trained to think in terms of how do you apply a concept into practice. We are taught that this is XYZ is the concept or the theory, but the practical application is never taught to us, or we've never been forced to think in terms of practical application. So if in general, as a rule of thumb, if you can kind of like talk about in even in a security setting, if you can talk about research and how it applies to your practice, then that makes it very useful for the audience also. So one of the things to also remember is that part of the formation of a community is also about how much you share your own experiences and therefore how others relate to it. And those experiences are what constitute insights. And when the insights are shared, there's this aha moment of saying, hey, I
Mhm.
relate to what Vandana is saying, or I relate to what, this person is saying, or I relate to what Neelu is saying. And that kind of gives you a sense of relationship and also opens up the doors to have a conversation after your talk. And that's actually what you want as a speaker, which is not just that your audience like claps for you at the end of your talk, but actually comes and talks to you after your talk because, they want to hear more or they want to kind of relate their experience, etc. And in that sense, if we think about it, then that actually is what strengthens the community.
Okay, great. And now when we have all this relationship for and let's say the talk is for 40 minutes, starting with 30 minutes, in 40 minutes or 50 minutes, how many slides should we have for that presentation?
Right. So that's a good question. There's actually no standard answer in terms of how many slides you can have. But
Mhm.
here are a few things that we have learned. Number one, the hardest talk to deliver are the ones that you deliver in the shortest period of time, which means that you have to
Mhm.
make your message very short and very clear. If you are going to challenge yourself to speak for 15 to 20 minutes to an audience and close it. Secondly, as a rule of thumb, most people's attention starts to wane off after 30 minutes. So even in our conferences, we tell the speakers, please don't go beyond 32 minutes because after that the audience is going to start drifting away unless and until you're a very captivating speaker or you have a very captivating story to tell. The third thing is more than the number of slides, a few things to remember are first, not more than 3 bullet points per slide. Because if you have too much text on your slides, then the audience is just going to sit and read the text on the slides rather than listen to you. Second, try to put as many visuals as possible. And by visuals, we don't mean like force fit some cartoons and graphics, but where possible, use visuals because visuals keep the audience engaged. The third thing with respect to making slides is there's a standard pattern to kind of follow, which is have an introduction slide where you explain what you're going to cover. In some cases, it's also a very good idea to tell the audience what is it that you're not going to cover. So have a slide also about what you're not going to cover so the audience expectation is set from the start. Third, don't have more than one slide explaining the context or the problem that you're going to cover because the longer you take to get to the problem, the more the chances are that the audience is going to drift away from your talk and there are enough distractions in terms of going to Twitter or YouTube, etc.
Mhm.
So stick and I mean like be very concise in terms of framing your problem or framing what is it that you're talking about and try to explain it within one slide and end it. And then of course you have your slides in between. Towards the end, make sure that you have a contact details slide where you mention like how people should contact you and where that depends if you're very active on LinkedIn, give a LinkedIn URL, or if you're active on Twitter, give a Twitter handle, or if you're active on email, share your email, but definitely give your contact details. So visuals important, not more than 3 bullet points per slide. Keep the slides very less text heavy because otherwise audience will end up reading the text on the slide. Use visuals where possible. And in some cases, also very useful to kind of use graphs and tables to show metrics, to show comparisons, to show before after situations, etc.
Okay. And
And as far
now,
as possible, please don't depend on internet at conferences and try not to do live coding because unless and until you're very seasoned with doing live coding, because in our experience, people, even a good speaker gets nervous on stage, and instead of live coding, you're correcting your typos on the stage. Like we've seen this happen more often than not.
Okay. So now it's more on the with how confident one is on the stage. There are questions that come in for sure. Most of the talks, in the end, people have questions, and as you said that people should reach out to you after the talk.
Yeah.
So
Mm.
uh, should a person give detailed explanation while answering the questions on the stage? And when you're taking up questions, it should be while the talk is going on or at the end of the talk. What is the best way to take
So
question and how to answer them?
yeah. Hmm. So ideally speaking, keep all the questions towards the end because even for very good speakers, you tend to lose track if your questions come in between. If the questions come in between, then as a speaker you lose track the of your train of thought. And in any case, there is always a sense of nervousness. And so taking questions in between also poses the risk that the talk will go off topic if there are too many off topic questions. So keep most questions towards the end. In terms of the extent of detail of answering questions, I've seen both things happen where speakers have kind of given very detailed explanations where there is no other answer but to give a detailed explanation. And in some cases, you just give like a standard explanation and move on, which is like quite concise and short. Uh, like I mentioned, in most of the events, the fun is not so much in the live Q&A as much as it is the conversations that happen outside. So if you have about 5 minutes of question answers after your talk, that, to be very honest, is good enough. What really matters is how many people reach out to you after your talk.
Right. And what should be the ratio of talk slide and demo?
Yeah, so that I think really depends on the substance you're trying to cover. In many cases, I have seen the demos don't take more than 5 minutes, or there are times when there are two or three demos in between which don't take more than 7 to 8 minutes. So if you're doing a talk that is about 32 minutes, ideally speaking, you don't spend more than 5 to 8 minutes in demo.
Mhm.
Unless, of course, your full talk is a demonstration, it's a tutorial, in which case it's perfectly okay.
Okay. Now, when we are giving all these talks, all the discussion is going on, sometimes the discussion gets heated up. So, how to
Yeah.
avoid those technical arguments and debates in a techie conference, wherein we have to
And
make
the
sure that
easiest, the easiest thing is to say, let us take this offline. That's the easiest to say. It's like, let's take this offline because I mean, there are times when there's an argument and it gets quite heated. Usually, the diffusion of the argument depends on the way the organizers structure things, which is that sometimes there's an MC or there is a moderator, at which point the moderator steps in. Typically, the diffusion is never done between the speaker and the audience, unless, of course, it's a meetup and the only thing that happens is the interaction with the audience and the speaker. But the ideal way is to say, let's take it offline. Now, I don't mean to say that you should not get into a debate. At times, it's important to get into a debate, and many a times it's actually healthy to have a confrontation because conflict doesn't necessarily have to mean negative. Sometimes the conflict also gives you a new perspective to think through. So it depends on the setting, to be very honest, and it also depends on whether. So one of the things to definitely note is the argument for the sake of argument, or is there a genuine argument that's being done? So there are also times when we've seen that somebody in the audience will want to heckle a speaker, and so they will keep asking the speaker questions which make the speaker uncomfortable or which are going to put the speaker in a spot. Now that is not acceptable. That actually should not, that should be sort of specified in the code of conduct for the meetup or the conference, saying that don't heckle your speaker. Don't question because you want to put your speaker in the spot. Have a genuine disagreement, because genuine disagreements are always good. A disagreement gives you a new way of thinking. So in that sense, it's worth to engage in a genuine disagreement. But if you're just heckling because a person in the audience wants to get some kind of a high by nudging the speaker in the wrong way, then that should not be acceptable in the event itself.
Okay, great. So I'm just checking if we have more questions because people have like so much enthusiasm and there are a lot of questions coming on. They're liking the session. Okay.
I'm glad. I was nervous while thinking about how to structure this. So.
Yeah. So, Amar just said, thanks for the nice answer. Genuine questions are always welcomed. And there is, as
Yeah.
you said, a healthy discussion is always good and it gives a new perspective for the speakers.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen cases where somebody will sit in the audience and will just want to kind of like, like, unfortunately in North India, we've seen this happen very often where people are sitting in the audience and they want to ask a question, not because they want an answer, but because they want to tease the speaker. And then we have to step in and
Mhm.
say, no, this is against the code of conduct. And in fact, I mean, one of the things we advocate is like even meetups and events should actually have very clear tell your participants beforehand and you make it visible and like it should be everywhere in the event space for people to see and say that this is acceptable in the conference, this is not acceptable in the conference.
Okay. Wow. That's actually was a wonderful session. Now, there's one question that I have. Now, we've
Sure.
given talks how to have. Now, there is a talk plus demo and certain images that we show. But how to keep your audiences engaged? Shall we give them certain antidotes or something which is what should be? How
Yeah.
can we make a talk different?
Yeah, it's always nice to give anecdotes. The more you share of your personal, the more you share from your personal experience, the better it is. One thing to remember about the visuals and any graphics that you put, actually two things to remember for any visuals, graphics or tables that you put in your slides. One is if you've taken this off the internet, you should cite the source. Otherwise, it comes across as it is your work. So put the source link below the table itself or below the graphic itself so that there is proper attribution. The second is there are enough events, meetups, and conferences where there's a code of conduct where you have to ensure that the graphics and images that you use are not making a sexist remark or they're not stereotyping anybody, any kind of group or a race or any kind of identity group. So that is one thing. Those are two things to watch out for. One, attribution. Second is to ensure that the graphics and images that you use don't come across as derogatory or as hurtful to somebody else in the audience.
Okay, we'll make sure.
Sorry, I mean, I deviated from the question that you asked, but yeah, in general, telling a good, engaging story and sharing from personal experience as far as possible is very, very healthy and is very good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's actually very helpful. And you actually answered the question that I wanted to know about because
Okay.
manage talk for a fresher, intermediate, and an expert, which is there in the audience? Do you specifically mold the talk for such audiences, or do you say that give a disclaimer saying that this is a fresher talk, intermediate talk, or an expert talk?
Yes, so ideally, actually, it's the responsibility of the event organizers to tell the audience in advance what is the level of the talk itself. It's really not a speaker's responsibility because if the organizers have accepted a certain talk, then it's their responsibility to communicate it with the audience.
Okay,
Yeah.
sure. So, do you want to give the any summarize? Do you want to summarize it, or do you want to give some last words before we move on to the next speaker? Any piece of
Sure.
advice that you want to give it to everybody?
Sure. So, just last couple of things. Have enough time to prepare. Have enough time to prepare what you are going to, what you write and submit as a entry to a conference is going to be very different from what you will end up actually speaking. Don't worry about it. I was doing my PhD once upon a time, and the best advice I got from my advisor was that of all the material I gather and all the fieldwork and research I do, I will actually end up using only 10% of that in my final thesis. So don't be afraid of like giving up on your original ideas. and move towards being more nuanced, or stay obsessed, because when you're obsessed with your idea and about what you're going to talk about, it really means that you're very passionate, and it will actually come across very nicely when you finally deliver. And last but not the least, when you get when you're showing your talk or getting feedback from colleagues, and if you get very negative feedback from colleagues, try to find colleagues or friends who will give you positive feedback, because especially there are enough women speakers who mentioned to us this, and I've also written about it, is that in work environments, when women step out to speak, they get a lot of negative feedback, and that actually pushes you and makes it even more harder for you to come out and speak. So if you get negative feedback at work, either try to find colleagues who will give you positive feedback, or just grit your teeth and go out there and do it. Nothing stops you, and always trying is always the best first step.
Or reach out to you.
Okay, sorry, Vandana, I didn't understand what you said.
Oh, I said, or reach out to you.
Yes.
That's a good idea.
Well, yes,
Well,
yeah, I mean, I'm hoping that there are actually more people. So, in fact, Vandana is clearly one of the people to reach out to, because she's also been reviewing our speakers, and in fact, she's been suggesting people. So, I'm sure Vandana will also have as good advice to give.
I'm really, really glad that you joined the session today. The session was very informative, and it's really, really helpful for all of us, because we've got to learn so many new things that we can actually implement in our sessions. Because all of us, in some or the other way, we want to submit a CFP, and we get scared that whether to submit the CFP or not, whether it will be a good idea or not. We always have that fear. And sometimes when people say that this is not a good talk, you shouldn't submit it, we just get scared and don't submit. And that's where you just get stopped and you don't move ahead in that direction at all. So it really is amazing that we should have some peers or mentors who give you positive feedback as well, that it might
Yeah.
last a long way. Yeah, great. So thank you so much. And the people in the chat box says, thanks for the nice session. The session was great, very helpful. Thank you so much. So all of
Yes, thanks a lot, and definitely do consider submitting to Hasgeek events or events listed or other events listed on hasgeek.com. We are always there to help.
great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Zainab.
Yes, thanks, Vandana.
Great. So now we are moving on to our next speaker. Her name is Ramandeep. She's a security consultant with an MNC, and it's been 4 years of her in the industry. And she said, "Now it's time for me to speak for InfosSec Girls," which she herself came up and said, "I have this particular topic, and there's another one also, so I can give on both the months." So now I want to start off with some sessions. Can you please let me know which one is the good? And I really, really want to do that, which was really amazing, that women are coming up and saying that we want to speak. So now I want to give it to Raman, and she let her introduce herself about the topic that she has. Over to
hello
you.
everyone. Yeah, thank you, Anna. Thanks a lot. You speak like really nice words about me, I guess. Yeah. So my name is Ramandeep Kaur, and I have been into industry for 4 years, as Vanna has told you. And today I'm here to speak on a topic in within information security, which is about JWT tokens and its exploitation. So without taking much of your time, I'll begin with what I have for you, and we can speak about all other things later. We can take up questions also. Yes, Vanda, we can take up questions at the end, right? I can begin with my slide.
Sure, Raman. There's only one thing that I have to say, that I can see a little echo from your side.
Okay, I'll try to fix it. Give me a moment.
Sure. So while Raman is fixing her audio, if you have any questions, you can post it into the chat box. We will convey it to the speakers, and you will get your response. As Zainab mentioned, you can reach out to editorial and at hasgeek.in. Also, we will keep sharing the speaker details so that you can reach out to the speakers yourself. Now,
Yeah, Vandana, is it fine now? Should I
yes,
speak a little louder?
yes, you can get started.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Okay. Thanks, Vanna. Thanks a lot once again. So, yeah, now here I am with the presentation on JWT tokens and its vulnerabilities. Uh, yeah. So, I'll brief you upon what I'm going to talk about today. So, we'll start off with a brief introduction on JSON. We'll talk about what is JWT and how does JWT format looks like. And we'll also be sharing few examples and the vulnerabilities associated with JWT. Yeah. So let me share my screen. Uh, yeah. Okay. Here. Yeah. So as we move on to the topic, JSON Web Tokens, let me introduce you all with the JSON, which is, I guess, as of now we all are familiar with. It's JavaScript object notation. And in a very simple terms, if we talk about it, JSON is nothing but a format to represent the data in the form of key value pair. So yeah, so in JSON we basically have JSON data and JSON objects. JSON data, as I told you, is a key value pair, and the JSON object is something which contains multiple key value pair. Why I'm talking about this is because JWT token is generated uh, with the help of three fields: header, payload, and signature. And our header and the payload are in a JSON format, which is key value pair. Okay, this is the quick example we have where suppose if we have a form and we sometimes mention like our first name, last name, and here is the representation in key value pair. First name is the key and the value which it contains is John. Last name is again key and the value which it contains is Doe, John Doe. Yeah. Okay. The very first picture which I have on my slide is same about the JSON and the key value pair. Okay. So since we speak about JSON, let's learn a little about JWT tokens as well. So what is basically a JWT token, JSON Web Tokens? These are the tokens which are used to authorize these are basically the authorization tokens. So how do we use it? Once a user is logged in into the application and is authenticated into the application, JWT token is generated, and uh, and the JWT token authorizes a particular user within the server to access the protected resources. This was a bit about JWT token, and I have put a picture here which is highlighted in yellow, that this is how a JWT token looks like, which starts from UI, and sometimes it has a bearer schema as well, and it is in the request with the authorization header. So I guess it's pretty simple. We spoke about JSON, we spoke
Raman?
about yes, Vandana.
Can we make it a full screen, because a lot of people cannot see the
Yeah.
highlighted screen. So
Should I zoom it up?
there's a computer icon on the right hand side of your slides at the bottom
Uh,
corner.
yeah, there is one.
Yeah, you can click on that.
Yeah. You mean should I zoom it a little? Will it help?
You can zoom it, but I think you can, when you make it full screen, then on the left hand side, if we see one, two, three, four slides, we wouldn't be able to see that, but the focus would be on your slides.
Okay, okay.
Yes,
I'll just figure it out.
sure. So on your slide deck, on the right hand side, you will see a small computer icon, and there, when you click on it, it'll make it full screen.
Okay. Is that to click means?
Or you can press F5.
Yeah. I guess it's some problem here.
That's okay.
Yeah.
You can share your screen. That's
Uh,
fine. Sometimes it happens with the
yeah.
presentation deck. That's okay. You can
Uh,
share your screen, please.
is it fine now? Uh,
We can't see your screen now.
okay, one moment. I just
Sorry to interrupt you.
no problem, no problem. So I guess if people are not able
Yes, I
to,
think this is good. We can go ahead. Yeah, this is
okay,
good. Now it's more zoom, so
yeah,
we can see it clearly.
yeah. So what I'll try to do is, if I have any picture like that, I'll try to zoom it more and focus on that what I'm trying to explain, the highlight. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
sure.
Sure.
Please go ahead.
Okay, so we were on JWT tokens. Yeah, here is the highlighted text where we can see that we have our JWT token, uh, which starts from EY, and basically sometimes it is also with the schema bearer. Okay, so yeah, we spoke about JSON, we spoke about JWT tokens. Let me show you a tool URL. Yeah, here is the link to a JWT IO online tool where we can, uh, which we can use to decode, verify, and generate JWTs. I can zoom it a little bit. Yeah. So you can see here where I'm pointing, we have three fields for a JWT token, which starts with header. We have payload, and we have the signature. Yeah. So if we see with the header, we have key value pair of algorithm. So algorithm is nothing but what algorithm we are going to use while we are going to uh, verify we are going to generate the signature. Okay. So next we have payload. I have another slide where I can explain the JWT format quickly. Yeah. So there are three parts of JWT format. As I told, there is header, there is payload, and there is signature. So all the three parts are concatenated with period and is encoded by base64 URL encode. And here in this image, as you can see, that token is generated by encoding the header, payload, and the signature with the base64 URL encode, and it is concatenated with the period. Yeah, so once we encode this token into base64 URL, uh, we will see that in the image, the token below is has three parts, and it is period concatenated with the header, the payload, and the signature. So I guess I'm clear about how does a JWT format token looks like. Yeah. So let me talk about a bit about what do we have in headers. So in this example, in my another slide, we have header, and header is contains or the type of algorithm we are going to use to sign the signature. That's about the header, and the algorithm which we can use is can be I can give example of is HMAC with S SHA-256. We can use RSA with SHA-256. So either it can be symmetric or asymmetric algorithm. Next, moving on to the payloads. So if we talk about payloads, payload is nothing but set of claims or the uh, user related details. Like in this example, we can see, okay, yeah, that we have a user related detail, which is uh, that the user currently logged in to the application would be pop, and logged in as key field with the value Bob. So here you can see that logged in as key field and the Bob. This is a registered claim. No, this is a uh, custom generated claim, and IAT is issued at, and that is registered claim. And since we talk about the claims, so this is how our payload looks like, which is a set of claims or the user related details, and header payload, and the what do we have next is signature. So let's talk about the signature. Signature is nothing but it will securely validate the token. So how a signature is formed? Signature is calculated by encoding the base64 URL encode header and with the help of base64 URL encode payload, and it is concatenated with period. And uh, both these fields are then run by the algorithm which is mentioned in the header. This is how we calculate our signature. So I guess I'm pretty much clear. It's a very simple example I have shown to all of you about the headers, the payload, and the signature. Uh, yeah. Okay, we can take any questions if we have about the how does a JWT format looks like. So in this example, you can see that token below, and there's a token concatenated with period. I guess we are clear about the JWT token format. Yes, let's talk about something really interesting now, which is attacking JWTs, JWT tokens. So these are the few issues, the vulnerabilities associated with JWT token, which is none algorithm, HS256 key brute force, RS256 to HS256 key bypass, yeah, which is asymmetric cipher algorithm to symmetric cipher algorithm. Fine. We'll start with none algorithm. So why do we call the none algorithm as none algorithm a vulnerability? It is so because there is no signature involved. So basically, what happens is, suppose developer is debugging the code and they have enabled none algorithm. So when they fail to uh, they fail to remove the none algorithm from the code, and the application is uh, in live state now. That's when the attacker takes advantage of this very good opportunity. So how do they do that? Let me show you some steps. I guess it's quite easy, and we can see on a burp decoder how we do it. Uh, yeah. So these are the few steps. You can read about it later because slides will be available. These are the POCs, but let me show you what do we basically do. So this is the one of the token, JWT token, which I have. Vandana, is everything clear? Should I zoom it a little more?
You can zoom it a little, but I can see it.
Okay, okay.
I think
Let
everyone can see.
because the text is very small here. Okay. Yeah. So we were talking about the none algorithm. Uh, this is one of the JWT token which I have captured from an application. So, but I cannot just show you the request response of that application because it's a little bit more confidential. Let us talk about the token, and the token is available online also. We can generate any JWT token and just practice here on the in the verb suite. So you can see that there is a token which I have here in the highlighted text. So what we're gonna do is we have captured the token. We're gonna decode it as base64 in the text format. So let me highlight it a bit. Yeah. So what do we have here is the algorithm. The header looks like the algorithm is HS256, 256, and type is JWS. And here is where we have the payload. And there is a little pause here. There's a little dot, and after that follows the signature. Okay. So the login user is Alice. What we're gonna do is we're gonna remove the algorithm to none and user to admin, and we'll remove the signature as well. So and encode it as P64. Here is our in the third field, we can see this is the manipulated token, which we can pass into our re request in verb suite, and we can uh, see the response. So what it will basically do is it will give us the access from a lower privileged user, which was Alice, to a higher privileged user, which is going to be the admin. So let's quickly read out the none algorithm steps. So we have captured the JWT token. And we all know that how do we identify the JWT token, and we'll decode the token, manipulate the payload with required values, change the algorithm, re-encode the manipulated JWT with base64 encode, and replay the request with the manipulated JWT. In my next slides, I have the steps repeated. Then I have captured the token. You can see I have how does a JWT token look like here. So this is we have captured the token, the JWT token. Yeah, and then we'll send it to the decoder, decode as B64. This is the decoded JWT token as I have showed you the demo. Yeah, this was the decoded base64 token, which had the algorithm HS256 and login user as a very low privileged user in the payload. And so, okay, let me place it. Yes. So what we did there was we have changed the algorithm to none, and we have removed the signature. We have changed the login to the admin, and this is how our manipulator JWT token will look like. And we have to encode this token into base64 URL encoded format and replace this request to access the higher privileged user. Okay. The slide is same again. I'm showing that how does the encoded JWT token looks like. And so we have passed here in this slide the manipulated token, and we'll see we can perform this in any of the application which has the JWT token and see what result we're gonna get. Okay, so I spoke about the none algorithm. Now let's move on to the second vulnerability, which is HS256 key brute force. Yeah, so HS256 is an algorithm which is used to generate the signature, and it uses the symmetric key to generate the signature. Um, since brute force takes a lot of time, I guess I can't show you guys the demo here, but I guess I can tell you after, yeah, steps here. Like once we copy the JW2 token, what we're gonna do is we are going to use the tool, either JWT cracker tool, or we're gonna use the JTR, John the Ripper tool, to crack the signature with a dictionary file. So basically, in HS256 key brute force, since it is a symmetric key algorithm, what we're gonna do is we're gonna brute force the key which is used in the signature. So this is a small example which I have given. This is the command which we're gonna run through the JWT cracker tool, which is like we're gonna give JWT cracker and the token and the alphabets in the yeah. So along with the here, this is just an example where I have given alphabets from A to Z, but depending upon the type of the key we are brute forcing, we can give uh, colon, we can give dollar sign or anything. And I have mentioned number 6 here, that my key which I'm going to crack is of 6 characters. So here is the POC. I guess let me show you the command here. If you can see, the command is JWT cracker, the token, and the alphabets from A to Z. And yeah, so it is attempting to brute force the key, and secret key is found here. That is a secret. Uh, yeah. So this is how the POC of the tool I have showed you, which is JWT Cracker tool. So this tool we can download from GitHub. I have provided the link also here. So this was about the key brute force with the help of HS256 algorithm. Yeah, fine guys. Let's talk about RS256 to HS256 key bypass. So as we know that HS256 is a symmetric algorithm. Uh, so along with it, we have RS256, which is uh, asymmetric algorithm. That means it uses the private key to sign the message and uses the public key for authentication. Okay, so if we look at the slide here, that Alice is the uh, user and David is the attacker. Both of them are trying to communicate to Tim. So Alice is trying to communicate with a message hi. David is trying to temper that message and pretend to be as Alice and is trying to send the message you stink. Okay, so yeah, in this part, what we're gonna talk about is like how does the RS256 algorithm help us to receive the uh, zero tempered message, which is high, which is not you stink, which is that David is trying to temper the message. So okay, Alice is using a public key and private key. The public key used by Alice is 001 and the private key is 123. So the message hi, which Alice is sharing in the HTTP request body, goes as a hash value of the private key and the message. Uh, yeah, in the form of the signature. In the HTTP request, we can see that there is a header, uh, which is public key, uh, which is going to the, uh, which we are communicating to Tim. So yeah, in header, we have public key, we have the signature, and we have the message in the body. So once the message request reaches to Tim, what's happening here is that Tim is trying to, uh, Tim has the private key already, and the public key is sent in the HTTP request. So the hash which Tim has generated with the private key and the request body message is equivalent to what Alice has shared. So since the the signature was equivalent, so we know that Alice made the request and the data was not corrupted. So okay, so this is how RS256 works, which is an asymmetric algorithm. It's explained here. Ah, so what happens basically in RS256 to HS256 key bypasses, server now is expecting to receive a token which is signed with RSA, but receives a token signed with HMAC. So HMAC, how does a verification for HS256 look like is, it has client token and the server secret key. And RS256 signature token verification server code looks like it has the client token and the public key. So since we have tampered the algorithm from RS256 to HS256, the server recognizes the public key to be the secret key for HS256. And that's how we are able to exploit the vulnerability. I have a quick demo here. Let me explain you a little. We have a wildcard entry of uh, public key here. So how we can exploit this is basically when we have hands-on of the public key, which we can get from a hidden directory or something. So for my demo, I have uh, public key saved on my desktop. So the tool which I'm going to use for the demo would be rest.secaps.com tool. What we're gonna do is, yeah, so what we're gonna do here is we have the RS256 token, and the RS256 token uh, JWT token is using the algorithm RS256. Login is John Doe, and the login here with the John Doe is the payload. Yeah, and algorithm RS256 and the type JWT token, the since I have highlighted it, is the header. So let us go to the, okay, the tool. So this is the rest.secaps tool. So in this tool, what we're gonna do is, since in query name, I have already used JWT token query field. Okay. Okay, let me just refresh and try doing it again. Yeah, so this is how the tool looks like. What we're gonna do is we're gonna take JWT token as the query name, and the payload would be the user details, because we have only user details in this JWT token key. Okay, and we are changing the algorithm from RS256 to HS256. And the secret key which I already have on my desktop. Let me pull it. Yeah. So since I have the key I have used is the public key which I have obtained, and I've changed the algorithm from RS256 to HS256, and the payload is John Doe. What we're gonna do is let's play around with the payload. Go to the presentation. Yeah, so we saw that this is how we're gonna use the tool rest.secaps, and to change the algorithm from RS256 to HS256. And once we have the public key, let me look on to the steps here. So the steps contain decode the obtained JWT token. Yeah, change the algorithm to HS256, which we tried doing right now, and sign the token with the public key obtained. Pay64 encode the entire token and replay the request with the encoded token. Yeah, so I guess these were the three vulnerabilities associated with JWT token. Let's yeah, so the tool which we have used here is rest.secaps tool. We can also use to decode and verify the signature, the jwt.io online tool. And here are certain remediations that we can look upon the disable the null algorithm from the JWT library to avoid the null algorithm vulnerability. We can also say that developers should always point to the right decode method, and it should not be set to default HS256. And another remediation step which we are going to see here is the KID parameter. So what a KID parameter is, it's the uh, in the example you can see that along with the algorithm uh, key value pair, we can also have the KID parameter, which is a key value field. It's very simple. It's very simple that once we have the KID to look up the key and its corresponding algorithm, attackers are no longer able to control the manner in which a key is used for verification. So we can, I don't have the demo to show how does a KID parameter look like, but I have a small example. So yeah, so basically if we talk about the NUN algorithm issue, if we talk about HS256 brute force or RS256 to HS256 key bypass, in all the three vulnerabilities, what we can, it can be remediated with the basic these three steps which I have told. And okay guys, so what we spoke about today was what is JSON, what is JWT, why do we use JWT, and what applications use JWT. So basically, JWT is used by any application written on any programming language, but because JWT is we use in the form of by importing the JWT libraries, which we can use with PHP or Java, and we use for the application which is written in any programming language. We spoke about the JWT format. Format is nothing but we have the header, concatenated payload, and the concatenated signature. We spoke about attacks. We spoke about we just spoke about remediation step with the help of KID implementation. And okay, I guess yeah. I should stop sharing my screen now and hand it over to Vandana. I have put my last slide as thank you and how you can reach out to me. That's my LinkedIn profile, and you can reach out to me over my Gmail as well. Thank you guys. If you have any questions or anything, we can take up right now. Yeah, Vandana.
Thank you so much, Raman. That was a very good session. Now I am just giving it to the audience if they have any questions for you. So now, Raman, I have one more question. Can you share your slides again? Just go to the JWT token and show how that's being built upon, how you can modify it.
Yes, yes. Yeah. Yeah, this is the JWT format slide. We have a tag. How we can modify is the, yeah. Are we talking about this slide, Vandana? Oh,
Yeah. Thank you so much, Raman. Um, we don't have any questions at the moment, but people say it's a great session. So you've shared your details where people can reach out to you. And if you have more questions, you can redirect to me also. We will share the slides from the speakers post the session. And up next, we have Catherine. She's a security consultant with one of the MNCs, and also she's one of the VIA officers. Apart from that, she does a lot of pen testing activities. So I would like her to speak more on the topic that she has today and take it forward from here. Hi, Catherine. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me, Mandy? Vandy, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Catherine. I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Well, let me just go ahead and share my screen so we can start. So can you guys see my screen? Yes, no? Okay. So basically this talk was a result of a couple of research that I was doing during the last 2 years before and during the GDPR phase within Europe. Because a lot of my clients and a lot of my friends started asking me, okay, what do I need to do to be ready for GDPR? And the question was very tricky because it obviously involved a lot of things to be done on server side, maybe on the site, on the website, just kind of like maybe adding a couple of details regarding how they were managing the data and so on. So it wasn't that simple to say, yes, you just need to, I don't know, apply all the patches and that's it. It was quite tricky. The most important thing was that whenever I was trying to give advice on this, I always faced the question, okay, but who can do this? And it was kind of like complicated to say, okay, no, this is your job, this is maybe your lawyer's job, this is the developer's job, this is the sysadmin job, and so on. So I started thinking, okay, how can maybe I explain to everyone that GDPR and basically everything within IT and cybersecurity is not only one person's job. So and yeah, basically the idea of this talk is to go from the code from the very beginning, that when you start thinking about creating or working with IT, to basically the infinite and beyond, because it doesn't stop. It never stops. So, okay, let's start. And Vandy, please feel free to interrupt me if there are any questions on the YouTube channel. So yeah, let's go. So our agenda. Just a basic introduction to who I am, so you get to know me a little bit better. Then we're going to be talking about the attack surface and how can these actually change the different ways that we can actually understand a problem. We're going to be talking a little bit about vulnerabilities and threats and how these ones differ from each other, and how can obviously change the output of our results. Going to be discussing a little bit all that about heroes and villains and all that kind of things. And at the end, I will share a couple of tips, tricks, and checklists, because I find very important to create content, to document things and say, okay, yes, I know how to do this, but it is important that the content is there. It's important there is a checklist there. It's important that anyone can just take the checklist, follow the different steps, and apply the content, maybe the knowledge that someone else already created. And well, regarding the kind of like sections, you're going to see a lot of phrases from the art of war, from Sun Tzu, because I think one of the most important things is to know your enemy and know yourself. Because if you don't know, you as a developer, as a IT consultant, as a security consultant, as a company, you don't know what kind of threats you might be facing. So yeah, the pictures are just some of my pets. an animal lover. Yeah, you're gonna see them there. Um, so about me, I am Colombian, currently living in Dublin, Ireland. I love cybersecurity, and I've been doing these kind of things for, I don't know, half of my life. I love creating content and speaking, and maybe sharing a little bit of the knowledge that I've gained, and maybe someone else I'd rather share with me. So professionally, I'm a cybersecurity consultant currently working for Accenture in Ireland, and my free time, I love doing things with the Women in Apps project, and basically hacker from 9 to 5, and then 5 p.m. to 9 a.m. Just not as official. For anyone that wants to follow me on Twitter, my ad is Epica with double E at the beginning, and you can find me as Catherine Cancelado on LinkedIn. About I think this is gonna be just like to share the information that we love sharing with everyone. Kind of like different content and trying to encourage more women to participate and get a little bit more active within the community, because it's important for us to show that we are role models and to be a role model for the new generations. So whenever the little girls are growing up, they see women engineer, they see women IT security consultants, and so on, and they are going to think, okay, I can also do this. So yeah, for those that don't know about the project, please just follow the link here and get in touch with us. Okay, let's talk about the attack surface and how everything is perception and deception. So whenever we think about a company, maybe a website, an application, we see in some cases that the attack surface is only what the user is interacting with. Maybe the different forms and fields that the developer created, and that's it. Sometimes we just focus on what we can see, what we can interact with directly, or what we actually created in order for our users to interact with. However, this never stops here, because there are a lot of fields that maybe we didn't create for the user to interact with. However, an attacker, maybe cyber attacker, can study the code, study the request, study maybe the server, study the people working with the application, and prepare attacks that are maybe not oriented on the form and the UX that we have created and designed, but maybe on the people or the server that we are hosting our application on. So if we think about the attack surface, there are a couple of things that we might need to start thinking. So from the, let's say from the kind of like browser side of things, we have URLs, we have the forms, we have the content, media content in general, we have the third-party content, and we have header and cookies. So the URLs are not meant to be, shall I say, modified. And we are not creating the URL so the user can just go and add a variable there and just change the content and change the way they are basically seeing things. However, these are really important things to look after, and all the content coming through URLs should carefully be sanitized, validated, and so on. Another thing is the forms. So it's kind of like tricky for some developers to understand that in some cases, even though we have the like hidden fields, you can actually intercept the requests, modify these hidden fields, and even though they are not designed as a form that the user can interact with, they can actually be modified, and they have to be obviously validated on client side, on middleware, and server side as well. So a typical example here will be, shall we say, let's think about a car payment processing. So we are not basically telling the user to go and log in into a specific bank application and make the payment. We are actually importing all this information and calling this information from our server. Therefore, we are pulling this content and we have to have it there. And in some cases, maybe we are using an iframe to load a specific application from the bank or the third-party provider in order to allow us to do the payment. So these applications can normally be called by a hidden fields, and we can actually modify these, the result for these hidden fields, these values, and make the server obviously do things that it's not supposed to do. So forms is something that we really need to be very careful with. Now, if we think about media content, there are two sides here. One of them is the media content that we have available to our users. So pictures, PDFs, Word documents, maybe videos, audios, and so on. In terms of media content that we are providing to our users, it's important for us to review and delete any metadata that is contained within them, because we could be revealing information about the software that we are using, maybe our staff that are actually creating the content, or maybe information that we have left there for someone else to actually look at. I don't know, Peter, please update this, or whatever. It's important to review the metadata that we have on all of the content that we are publishing online, because this data can be downloaded, analyzed, and can be used in further attack strategies. The other side of the coin here will be when we are allowing our users to upload content to our servers. So in this case, there are a couple of things that we need to look for. First of all, the name of the file. Are we just allowing the user to upload a file whose name, basically with a name that maybe contains special characters or tags, or maybe a remote code execution for our server? So sometimes we just focus on analyzing that there is no malware on the file and that's it. But it's important to also validate the names of the files, because it is possible to inject code via these ones as well. And obviously, if we talk about malware, there are a couple of things there. It's important to validate that the media content is not malicious, but also the permissions with which that content is being stored on our server. So are we giving permissions to execute? Are we giving permissions only to store and that's it? Does everyone have access to the content that our users are uploading? Because, for instance, let's say we have malicious content coming into our server. Who is actually getting access to this content? Maybe someone else from our team is reviewing the documents, allowing them maybe to download these, execute malicious content on our staff machine, and so on. So it's important to validate that all the content that we are receiving, first of all, has the right names, has the right type of content. So I will highly recommend to do a check for the magic numbers, so we can validate that it's, whatever it says, it's PDF, it is actually a PDF, and not maybe just an executable whose name or extension is just that PDF. Then another important thing to do is to evaluate how are we interacting with our third parties. So if we are using a plugin from Facebook, from Google, from Twitter, LinkedIn, and whatever, we need to be very clear regarding how are we using this third-party software. Obviously, tell our users that we are interacting with these parties. So our responsibility doesn't finish with just letting them know that we are maybe sharing information here or there. It's also important to validate that we are always using the latest version of the third-party content, that the software that we are using does not contain maybe identified and very popular or known vulnerabilities, because all those vulnerabilities will be introducing risks to our applications and platforms in general. So it's very important to understand the risks of using third-party content. And if we are maybe accepting the fact that, okay, we do have to use this software, even though it has vulnerabilities and they are very well known, then we have to implement countermeasures on our server side, on our platform and systems, in order to prevent these applications from introducing any risk to our systems and our users, obviously. So now, if we talk about headers and cookies and how maybe servers communicate, well, browsers and web servers communicate, it is also really important to limit the content that our server can read and the browser can interpret. So if you think about how a server sends a response to a browser, and the server is telling the browser, okay, this is actually an HTML and contain images. Yeah, that's all you have to read. Then we are limiting the attack surface here. However, if we leave these up to the browser and maybe someone injected JavaScript, then we are allowing content to be processed that we should not be allowing. So the point here is basically try to reduce the attack surface no matter what. So the headers on the HTTP requests and responses are very important because they allow the server and the browser to interpret and read content in a specific manner. It's kind of like how we normally use special characters for maybe in the Japanese, Chinese, and how, for instance, the other people use just plain English. And so, if we are using, for instance, Spanish, we are going to have to load the specific keys and so on. So it's important to kind of know our public, know the application, know the system, and limit all the features to a specific what we need. So let's just leave the client side and let's move on to the server side. On this one, we will normally have databases, we will have maybe a web server, the application code by itself, we will have perimeter tools, and why not? We might have one or two bugs. So databases, FTP servers, Git code servers, and so on are basically what are storing, managing, and helping us to process our information and our users' information. Therefore, they have to be protected and they have to be carefully analyzed for bugs and security risks. So one of the most critical things when thinking about server side is the perimeter tools that you have here. And it is also very important to know that a perimeter tool is not just one, it's not just a firewall, it's not just the web application firewall. There are several perimeter tools that you can configure and help basically counterattack possible risks. So when thinking about databases, for instance, you have to think about the users that have access to this. The database is not like a web server that you can say, okay, yes, analyze this content and maybe if you like it, process it. If you don't like it, just don't process it. No, databases read queries, process the queries, give a response, and that's it. So who has access to the database? Who is actually interacting with the database? Is the database and the web server, talking to each other, or is maybe the database also talking to the bugs that we have here, to the antivirus, to the users that are actually using the platform? Who is actually the database talking to? The same way, who is actually talking to the web server? Who has access to the application code? And how can maybe I counteract bugs that I might have in my application? So, for instance, when talking about application code, we could think about secrets that we might have here, about a special algorithm that we have, maybe we have developed within the company, and it's not publicly available, and we are maybe using it to protect our information, and we don't want anyone actually reading our content, and then we are encrypting our information with our own encryption algorithm. So the secrets and basically the application code that we might have on our server side is very important. So if we think about just all the different components that one application, let's say one web application, depends on, we start not seeing how the attack surface increases, how it's not just about the forms that we created for the user to interact with, but all the information that the application actually uses to provide the content to the user. So we have a database, we have a server, we have the application code that is actually allowing the application to be run on the browser. We have the perimeter tools, we have maybe bugs due to the software that we are using, or maybe we didn't do a pen test and we didn't identify vulnerabilities on our code. Maybe this is a very, very old application and we are using Windows 2003. Oh God. So it's very important to understand that it's not only what the user sees, it's everything that my application depends on and is actually interacting with. So we could actually go back to think about how our application could actually affect the third parties. So if we are sending information to our third parties, are we actually sending good information, or are we allowing our application to maybe send malicious code to one of our third parties? What could happen if our application sends malicious code to our third party? Are we breaking our contract? So try to maybe graph all the components of your application, and maybe system, platform, all the different services and ports that you have open and enabled on your servers. And maybe you're talking about not only one server, but multiple servers. So let's move on to where our servers, and where, like geolocation speaking, is our information. So it can be a physical infrastructure, it can be your own data center, it can be your own server room, it can be maybe a third-party infrastructure, or nowadays we also have a lot of cloud. So if you have your own infrastructure, then you're going to have to think about availability, having maybe backups, different data centers that can pick up from, I don't know, an incident that happened on one of them, and just continue with the, servicing your users and so on. If you're talking about third-party infrastructure, then you need to think about the contracts, the SLAs, and some other information that you might not be able to manage, but you need to understand, and you need to maybe accept the risk depending on the contract and SLAs that you have. And you're talking about maybe cloud infrastructures. You need to think about public, private, maybe hybrid cloud preference, how the contract, the availability, the software that you are using is changing. So then again, we go back to saying, okay, yes, but I had only one web application, just a website with information here, and click all the things that are actually depending, on one web application, and how much damage I could do. So, well, now that we have kind of like covered the attack surface, which is just a very like brief list of items that we might need to think about. So let's just move on to vulnerabilities and threats. So what's the main difference between vulnerability and threats? Basically, a vulnerability is just software. Is let's say remote code execution, cross-site scripting, SQL injection, and so on. Threats can be anything. A threat can be maybe an earthquake. It can be my user actually, being attacked by a social engineering a PDF with malicious software in it, and so on. So we cannot just say, okay, yes, we have the latest software. We run all the pen tests. We did security audits on the platform. Yes, we are secure. We also need to think about security awareness. We need to train our users. We need to train our staff. And we need to make sure that, for instance, physical security, cloud security, and whatever other infrastructure we are using have also the appropriate countermeasures. Now, if we go back to thinking about vulnerabilities, I really like the SANS Top 25 because this one is focused only on software and how maybe different known attacks can be performed via different ways. We have multiple ways of doing a cross-site request forgery attack. Same goes for maybe integrity checks and I don't know, URL redirection and so on. So the top 25 from SANS basically focus on dangerous software errors. What's the error and what could this error cause or allow an attacker to do? So it's pretty cool if you think about how these lists are actually explained. They normally tell you, okay, this is the error, this is how maybe the bad practice is being done, this is what you are missing, this is how you should fix it, and this is how you should test for it, just to see that it has actually been fixed, or is it still there, or how to maybe do and perform the validations, how to implement integrity checks on your code, how to connect and maybe interact with different authorization mechanisms and so on. So it's a very rich and interesting list. However, it just stops with software. It doesn't go any further. And that's why I love the OWASP top 10, because in this one, it just doesn't stop with the software. It all talks about, for instance, security misconfiguration, which can be on server side, which can be maybe on the cookies and headers, or can be on the metadata that we have available on our media content. It also talks about logging and monitoring, because if we don't understand what our users or maybe attackers are doing with our platforms and systems, then we don't know what kind of countermeasures we might need to implement in order to prevent further attacks. It also talks about, for instance, number 9, using components with known vulnerabilities, which goes back to third parties and how are you maybe using these third-party software, this third-party content, and what are the risks of using them. So it's very interesting how we go from just software to actually policies, procedures, server side, and so on. So if we think about, for instance, logging in and monitoring, it's not enough with just tracking and recording all the actions that my application is doing. It's important for a human to actually review the content, the log, and say, oh, look, there is something not right here. And now, if we talk about mobile applications, and maybe I don't have an IoT checklist here, but OWASP actually does have the IoT top 10 as well. We now need to think about how the code, maybe the information is not being stored only on our server, but also on our users' mobile devices. So in terms of usability, we try to think about how can my user access the application and use the application while being offline. Therefore, we actually need to store information on the device. But how are we storing this information? Is it just in clear text? Are we encrypting this information? What kind of information do I actually need to encrypt? Or for instance, what kind of information do I actually need to cache in order to make the application faster? Are we caching maybe credit card data? We should not be caching that. Are we caching the user information? Maybe not. Are we caching our scripts in order to make the application run faster and maybe avoiding network connections, unnecessary network connections, and so on? Yes, that should be something that we might need to cache. So we need to think about, okay, let's say someone installed my user's mobile device and they have access to the application. Can they read my user's content? Can they read my user's information? Is my user's information going to be secure if the device gets on the wrong hands? So we are no longer thinking about just a web browser and how the information always has to be requested from our server. We are also thinking about mobility and how our application is interacting with other devices, from the IoT perspective, or maybe how it is actually a mobile application that my user has with them all the time. So threats. What's the worst thing that will happen? Well, my user could lose maybe their phone, or someone can get to my server. If someone access my server and they have access to the database, what kind of information can they get? If we think about information leakage on all the databases and places that we have been, reading, it's basically on the news all the time. Are they maybe getting access to an encrypted database? Okay, not too bad. Are they getting access to an encrypted database with password, with credit card data, with healthcare data? So always try to think, it's kind of like annoying, but always try to think about what's the worst thing that could happen. What happens if someone accesses my database? What happens if someone accesses, let's say, my user just left the application unattended, and they have access to their profile. Can they maybe change their password? Can they maybe perform actions? Maybe buy something without their knowledge? Sell something? So things like second validations and token validations and second factor and multi-factor authentication and so on are things that we need to think about all the time. And it's important to not to stop only with the sanitization and validation of input of our users' input. Now, who is the hero? Who is the bad guy? Who is responsible for an information leak? Well, to be honest, the problem is that we are always trying to find a responsible. And so who is the bad guy, the developer or the sysadmin, the third party? I would say it's no one's fault, and it's everyone's fault at the same time. Sometimes when you start maybe working as a developer, you just focus on creating the code, and you never interact with the sysadmin. The sysadmin is supposed to simply provide you with the server, and that's it. They give you access to the server, you deploy your application, and you walk away. But have maybe the developer talk to the sysadmin to say, okay, look, my application is going to be using these and these and these kind of things. Therefore, I don't need the server to allow, I don't know, the application to read JavaScript. So change the server headers in order to limit these kind of applications. Or maybe I'm not actually, you know what, I'm actually allowing my users to upload documents into the server. So can you please help me to implement an anti-malware solution? Because these kind of things depend on the server. Therefore, you have to talk to the sysadmin and check with them what can they do in order to help you, to validate that all the information that you are receiving and storing on the server is secure enough. So it's not the developer's fault, it's not the sysadmin's fault, it's not the third party's fault. It's just lack of communication between all of them, and how people think in some cases that their responsibility goes to just maybe developing and releasing the application. And the sysadmin simply builds the server, put the server online, and that's it. No. It's important to understand that cooperation and understanding the application, the system, the platforms, and everything that these ones depend on are critical for the security of it. Okay, so I'm nearly done here. So tips, tricks, checklists. Take a look to the OWASP top 10 proactive controls. Make sure that you are implementing security from the very beginning of your project, along the project, at the end of the project, once a year, twice a year, after every major release, after every minor release. Just make sure that you're being proactive and you are implementing the right controls to protect your application, your server, and especially your users' data. If you're a pen tester, or maybe if you're not a pen tester, just a developer, take a look to the application security verification standard, which basically tells you how to test your application for vulnerabilities, for common errors, as well as how to fix them, and how to maybe implement other countermeasures that are not just on your code, but maybe on server side, via which you can obviously prevent these attacks from being successful. The checklist is very nice because it's actually split into categories that can be easily implemented as part of maybe agile development or waterfall or whatever other software development cycles that we have. For instance, it talks about the architecture, the design, and the threat modeling, which is basically the first stage before you write the first line of code. Is okay, this is the target, this is what we're going to do, and these are the possible threats that we might be facing. Let's talk about configuration, which obviously goes on server side, on client side, middleware, and so on. Cryptography, how the data can be protected, addressed in transit. And well, basically, yeah, just take a look to the ASVS. Is pretty cool. It contains a lot of information, not just to verify if you are doing things right, but also how to fix any possible mistakes that you might have found along the way. And now my personal recommendations is research and try to follow good practices and guidelines. Uh, don't reinvent the wheel. There are a lot of tools that you can use. There are a lot of frameworks that actually include and maybe disable functions that are not secure. Use secure transmission. Use secure DNS, when storing and processing your data. Think about different states of the data whenever you are processing the data, transmitting the data, storing the data. And nowadays, which is very important as well, destroying the data and ensuring that no one can recover it. Document all your dependencies. We're going back to third parties and using software from here and there. It's important to know where your software is coming from and what kind of software and dependencies do you have. Because if you don't know these, then you don't know when you might need to maybe update the library or apply a patch and so on. If you're a company, think about the vulnerability management program. This one is not just pen testing and patching, it also includes the vulnerability assessments, risk ratings, how to approach maybe a specific risk, what are the timelines, who is responsible for applying the patches. Then think about backups, logs, and integrity checks. If something happened, you need to be able to recover your information. But if you don't have logs, you don't know what happened. So you might put your application back online and this one is going to go down in 30 seconds. So logs are important, but then the integrity check, maybe someone is actually changing the logs. So if you don't know who is changing the logs and maybe altering the information and documentation there, you might be actually reading information that is not trustable, that you should not be reading as maybe fake information. So integrity checks are important, especially when it comes to backups and logs. You don't want to be using the wrong information to perform actions that might be affecting your application and your users' data. Automation where possible. As I mentioned before, if you don't know the list of steps that you need to do, just go sit down and write them down. And if you notice that it's a repetitive activity, then automate it, because we as humans make mistakes all the time. And the important thing is that if we do it right once, and our script is doing it right the first time, then it's going to do it right the second, the third, and the fourth time. So just make sure that no one's changing this. So we're going back to integrity checks again. So make sure that the scripts that you are automating are actually doing what they are supposed to do and no one is changing them. Just read, research everything you can, and repeat all this. And finally, just try to hack yourself. That's the best way to know if your application is secure or not. Well, that's basically it. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here. And Vandy, I am open to questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Catherine. Apika, let me check the chat box. So, people want to know, even I have this question that, um, or I want to know your thoughts on cloud security.
Wow, cloud security. So it's very tricky. I know. I think the most important thing regarding cloud security is knowing your provider, doing your due diligence, and knowing basically the shared responsibility model. Knowing, okay, this is my responsibility, this is my cloud provider's responsibility, and how are we interacting between each other. Cloud is not bad. I love cloud security, and actually I do a lot of cloud security in my day-to-day job. But so cloud providers are obviously something that is basically being used nowadays all the time. It helps you to reduce costs. It helps to reduce maybe cost obviously on on staff as well, and you can maybe help your staff to focus on different things that are going to actually make more money than supporting the platform. So regarding, like, for instance, your data when it's being stored, they do have encryption. They support encryption. That's okay. They normally go with the latest software, and they try to get rid of all the obsolete software and no longer support software. So it kind of like pushes you to stay up to date all the time, and depending on what kind of platform you are using. If you are using infrastructure, then it is your responsibility to apply the patches. And we are going back to the shared responsibility model. That is your responsibility. But if you are using just software as a service, then you can be relying a little bit on your third party and saying, okay, they are going to apply all the patches. I just need to make sure that my content is here, and that's it. Regarding availability, obviously, all these depends on your SLAs and your contract, but availability is one of the basically easiest ones. Users, well, cloud users and cloud consumers can rely on the client, on the provider, and say, okay, yes, they have all these data centers, they have all these servers in the cloud. Yeah, my data is going to be available all the time. So yeah, that's cool. So yeah, I think I trust the cloud. I love the cloud. And I think I will say, just know the shared responsibility model. Make sure that you know your responsibilities and your provider's responsibilities. Because if you don't know theirs, you cannot go back and say, hey, guys, you didn't do, or you are doing this wrong. So yeah, just make sure that you know what is everyone supposed to do, and yeah, make sure that you are enforcing all these. Are there any other questions?
I am just checking the chat box. Thank you so much for sharing your views. So I don't think that we have more questions, but I'm sure people will reach out to you if they have more questions around it, and they will have, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Just if you want, talk to me, whatever. You can find me on Twitter or LinkedIn. So yeah, feel free to reach out to me. And yeah, thank you very much for listening today.
Thank you so much. Now, um, to close off the session, we have a few things to mention. That we want to make sure that we have amazing speakers and trainers filling in the CFP. There are a lot of conferences. Even Zainab was talking about certain conferences which she heads. You can you can submit the CFP there, or there are a lot of conferences around the world. Please feel free to do that. If you still have questions, reach out to us. We'll try and help you as much as we can and guide you so that you can take the path further. Also, please encourage the people around you. It's for the speakers or the trainers who are already part of conferences. Please encourage the people around you to submit the CFPs and CFTs in the conferences. And the most important thing, if you want to start off, speak at your local affinity groups. There are a lot of null groups, OWASP groups, and now we have OWASP women in AppSec groups. We've started at a lot of locations so that we can have physical meetups as well. We have a presence at London. We will be starting a chapter shortly in Virginia. We have a chapter in New York. We have a chapter in Ireland. In Pune, we had a meetup recently, and Delhi. So there are groups around. Please reach out to us if you want to start a chapter, so that we have our global meetups going on this way, and we have our uh, local presence as well, so that people know that yes, there is a group that exists, and if I have a question, we can reach out to the people around. And OWASP is always if you see the owasp.org page, there is a chapter almost at every location, and the leaders are really helpful. They really encourage more they really encourage inclusion. So we want to have an inclusion group, diverse ideas, diverse views. Also, please go to the on-site conference, make connections, reach out to people if you have questions. For today's speakers also, we've shared the details. Speakers have shared their details. Please feel free to reach out to them. All of them are actually very much reachable. All the details are there on the YouTube channel. You can reach out to me also if you still feel any hesitation reaching out to the speakers. I can bridge you in. So that's what I have to say for today. We also have another session next week, which is on the secure code review by Ken and Seth, which are wonderful speakers, and they will be giving their training this month at Global AppSec Tel Aviv. So I would suggest that if you can join the session next week, which is a 1 hour session on secure code review, they will be giving the tips and tricks to do the secure code review. I'm really looking forward to that session because I want to know that I have been doing secure code review, but if there's something new that I can add to it, there's something new that I can learn from them. So I'm looking forward to this session, which is on 11th at 9 o'clock. The meetup, OWASP Bangalore, OWASP Women in AppSec, WooSec tweets, we have shared the details. And we will be posting on the LinkedIn pages as well. You can take a look from there and subscribe to the channel so that you can know about the upcoming sessions as well. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining today's session. It was wonderful interaction with all the wonderful speakers and especially from the participants. Wonderful questions. Thank you so much for all the support and see you next week. Thank you.
Thanks, Vandana.